Things been written about him. They're in the handouts and they're online. Mostly I want to invite Ed up and thank him so much for speaking for us today.
Okay, hang on one second. Okay. Okay, well, it's good to be here. When Steve asked me to speak, I was a little taken aback, but I said, yes, let's try it, see what happens. So he asked me to speak about my journey of faith, and I have a subtitle for this, which is, All My Friends Drive Me Crazy. And I need them like crazy. So, the percentage of American men reporting no close friends rose from 3% in 1990 to 15% by 2021, five-fold increase. And I think it's getting much more so than that. Speaking for myself, I may not feel lonely so much as empty if I don't talk to somebody every day. It can be anybody, but I just notice this change in me that happens when I talk to somebody. When Steve asked me to talk about my journey of faith, it got me thinking about the word journey, because it implies a trek, a movement, a progression. And I think a more fitting metaphor for my faith would be mountain climbing, even though I've never mountain climbed in my life. But about 25 years ago, at a First Press men's retreat, I think David Gill might have been the speaker, I'm not sure. But I was going through a very difficult 4-year period of unemployment and underemployment that was putting a huge strain on my marriage. And I remember at one point we all broke off and went into the woods and just spent some time alone with God. And it was there that this metaphor came to me. Did that show up? No. Okay.
Try again. I'm not the best at this technology.
If this doesn't work, it's okay. I don't really need this.
We'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'll skip it.
The video, the slides will be in the video, so that much I can teach you all.
I imagined myself solo climbing up El Capitan. And terrified, I didn't look down. I felt really stuck. I felt paralyzed by fear and couldn't move. And I imagined Jesus with me saying, "You can do this, Ed. And just reach up and find the next hand grip. And then lift your foot and find the next foothold. You can trust me." And it was a powerful metaphor that I needed for that day. It was almost like a waking dream. And I was very surprised by my tears. I hadn't cried like that in a long time. It would be 1.5 years before I eventually got to the top of that metaphorical granite cliff and could rest a bit in a steady job. But that metaphor sustained me one foothold at a time. I'm not so sure about the solo part, though. I'm not sure we're meant to climb solo, even though I felt very solo in that moment. I was a church kid in a church family My parents took me and my brothers to church every Sunday. I loved going to our small evangelical free church in Chico, California. It was a sweet, kind congregation that focused on evangelical essentials like the inerrancy of Scripture, salvation by grace and faith, and coffee hours. I learned the important hymns of the faith like the Bible. Yes, that's the book for me. I recall this dream I had when I was just 3 years old. One of the first dreams I remember. I found myself in a vast field, a no man's land of burnt, dry sticks. I remember feeling lost and wanting to be home. I looked down at the sticks that littered the ground and wondered, what are these? And then a loud voice answered, that's sin. And I woke up really frightened. My guess is that I'd heard something about sin in Sunday school and didn't understand what it meant. I just knew it was something bad. My family attended at least 2 church services a week, VBS in the summer, church picnics, softball competitions with other churches. Church was the air we breathed, and Chico was a beautiful small town full of luscious oak trees and parks and a creek that ran through town. What was there not to love? But I couldn't shake a sense of vague unrest. I still remember carrying a lot of anxiety as a kid, wondering, was I really saved? What if I didn't get it right? What if I died like my brother's friend Artie, who got hit by a car on a paper route? And even the idea of heaven scared me. What if I didn't like it? What if Jesus returned, but I got left behind? When I was 10 years old, I went to Redwood Camp at Mount Hermon. It was 1966. Our speaker was a guy named Joy Cummings, a pastor and child evangelist who spoke with a lisp, which I was drawn to since I spoke with a lisp too. He was a master storyteller. His stories from the Bible mesmerized me. At that camp, all the loose ends I'd been hearing about at church seemed to come together and suddenly made sense. I wanted to follow Jesus. Really, it was all about Jesus for me. Jesus was central. I heard the good news and it made sense. So one night at a campfire circle, Joy Cummings invited anyone who wanted to follow Jesus and commit their lives to him to come forward and surround the campfire. I was shaking. I knew I needed to go forward. My older brother sat next to me, and I wondered, what would he think? Finally, I stood up and joined the other kids at the front, and my brother joined me. I remember Joy Cummings praying with us and then saying, "Go and give the devil the fight of his life." I felt as though something really significant had happened. And we all sang, "I have decided to follow Jesus." So I can point to that moment and say that was when I became a Christian. But it's not really that simple. My older brother Dave has a very different memory of that night. He feels like he was manipulated into going down. He feels like a huge guilt trip was laid on him and that he was frightened by the feeling that Jesus might return that night and he'd be left behind. So where I saw it as a positive decision, he saw it as very negative for him. In fact, he deeply resents all the church services and activities we had to go to as a kid. I want to say that I value my brother's skepticism. He has helped me many times to be cautious about authority figures who claim theological certainty. He has steered me away from sensationalist preachers. When I veered toward Bill Gothard, Dave dissuaded me. He said, "Why do you want to do that?" Dave was my first deep friend. He's very different from me. When we shared a bedroom growing up, we pushed each other's buttons a lot. When he wanted to play football in the street or cruise around with friends in our old 48 Chevy, I wanted to hole up in my room and read Bible commentaries. But then I would relent and have fun. He has helped me become larger as a human being, more relational and discerning. So now I want to back up and explore why friendships are not easy for me. A few years ago, I was doing some family history work when I came across my grandfather's obituary. I never knew him. He died several months before I was born. What I read really stunned me. My grandfather had served in the German military during World War I. His obituary said he served on 3 battlefronts over 3 years. 3 years in trench warfare on the front lines during World War I. How can you come through something like that untraumatized? The only story I could get out of anyone about my grandfather was that he had to pretend to be dead in no man's land to keep from getting bayoneted. And then I think of no man's land, that vast field of dry sticks. When I asked family members what he'd been like, they shrugged and said, "He seemed like a nice guy with a sense of humor." That was all. My father rarely talked about him. And like a lot of men of his generation, my dad, a Korean War vet, was a quiet, kind, and responsible family man, a TV repairman and sound technician at the church. But I had a hard time feeling close to him. My father spent a good deal of time in front of the TV, lost in football games or westerns. I remember watching TV with him as a way of connecting. He'd spend hours in a backyard shed talking with people on a CB radio, his form of social media. My mother, concerned about Dad's emotional distance from my 3 brothers and me, tried to make up for it. She threw herself into being a good mom, and maybe a good dad too. I rarely heard my father pray, so Mom prayed with us instead. Long on-your-knees prayers that embarrassed us as we grew older. In fact, even now I have kind of a hard time praying with other people. I think it might go back to that. I'm not sure. Dad helped with audio technology at our church in Chico. He would spend services in a tiny little closet of a room attached to the pastor's study with a reel-to-reel tape recorder and electronic equipment. He had a lot of social anxiety and didn't enjoy conversing with people. So that old-fashioned tech booth worked for him. He had a role at church that didn't require interactions. When church was over, he was impatient to get home. He often slipped out a side door and waited in the car for us. Mom was the opposite. She wanted to talk to everyone. The more Mom took charge, the more Dad checked out. He became the silent guest at our dinner table. He would feign illness to get out of things he didn't want to do. Eventually, my dad began to live a double life. He denied an affair when confronted, but it was obvious to everyone. Dad always seemed disappointed that we would question his integrity as though we were being disloyal. My father was very scared of transparency, and toward the end of his life, he would fabricate so many stories that I never knew what was fact and what was fiction. Before he died in 2005 of complications due to smoking, I remember thinking, this is the loneliest man I know. At his funeral, friends and relatives gathered and talked about what a nice guy he'd been. My brothers and I felt cynical and betrayed. Long after he died, we kept learning about secrets he'd kept from us all. To a large degree, I share my dad's social anxiety and discomfort. I have difficulty trusting men and believing I have something to offer. It's not rational, but it is firmly embedded. I've struggled with loneliness and isolation more than anything else in my life. But again and again, God has provided me with companions for my journey. How are we doing with time, by the way? We doing okay?
I'll raise my hand one time.
Okay. I was a shy, awkward kid in junior high, nervous around girls and cautious with guys. One day, this new kid showed up at church. He immediately wanted to know my name and talked to me as though we were old friends. His name was Charlie Brown. He was my opposite in every way. Chattery, expansive, eager to hold hands with every girl he set eyes on, except for Jill Stanley, which were too sweaty, he said. My social life changed immediately. His boldness rubbed off on me. As long as I was with Charlie, I had no problem meeting other kids. His verbosity and laughter won people over, and I was his best friend. It took me a while to understand that Charlie had lost his dad, a police officer, in a car accident a few years before, and that he wasn't at all happy with his new stepdad. I could sense the tension at his house. He wanted to follow in the footsteps of his real dad and go into law enforcement. Once when I was visiting him, we were in high school, he showed me his rifle down in his basement room and how he made his own ammo with gunpowder and bullet casings. The gun accidentally went off and shot a hole into the ceiling. No one upstairs was hurt, fortunately, but needless to say, it didn't go over well with his parents. I began to understand the complications that come with friendships. I cared deeply for Charlie, and he enlarged my life. At the same time, the older we got, the more our differences grew problematic, and we drifted apart. I went off to college. He joined the Air Force and became a cop in Portland. God started leading me into community when, a year after graduating from high school, I took on a 6-week summer internship with InterVarsity's multimedia division called 2100 Productions. It was 1974, the tail end of the hippie era, and we focused on creating old-style slideshows using Kodak slide projectors and dissolve units and psychedelic rock music to communicate the gospel to college students. Those 6 weeks transformed me. I'd never known people like that, a troop of creative, energetic young adults who took me under their wing and showed me what Christian community could look like. Most of the team members were older than me, from all over the world. They were the first Christians I knew who were committed to social action, like boycotting lettuce to support farm workers, and talking about living out the kingdom of God. I thought I knew a lot about the Bible, but these people challenged me to think more broadly about what it means to follow Jesus. After graduating from San Jose State with a degree in creative arts, I moved back to my hometown and felt adrift. Lonely and isolated, I thought I'd go crazy. But once again, God provided me with companions. I am so grateful that I met Brian Connery at that time. In case you don't know him, he's sitting right there. We're still friends. We'd gone to high school together and reconnected after college. Brian introduced me to a few of his friends in Chico who are artsy and a lot of fun to hang out with. We formed a small group which we called VAGUE, the Visual Arts Group. And we'd do photo shoots and dinners and living room concerts together. It was such a relief to have young adults to hang out with. Then I met Carol. Ironically, we met just as she was leaving town to teach first grade 75 miles away in Grass Valley. She was the first woman I knew who not only got my humor, but took her faith seriously and also liked foreign films. She was so practical and caring, always inviting people over for dinners, just like she does today. I helped her pack her U-Haul and drove it to Grass Valley as we talked the whole way. We communicated by letter and weekend visits for 2 years and then married in 1983. After we married, Carol and I taught English to university students in China for a year through Martha Chan's organization. Our faith was really stretched there. Not a day went by without as many miracles as difficulties. We wrestled with the deep joys and heartbreaks of cross-cultural friendships. Friends who thought nothing of dropping by at 10:30 at night, or who quietly bore their souls to us in private. Okay, so upon returning to the United States in 1987, we both had a difficult time finding well-paying jobs. Looking back at my journals, I'm struck by how worry and anxiety blinded us from many amazing things that God was doing. Again, God drew us into community, this time through First Press. The first 4 years were really hard. All of my dad's social anxieties flared in me. I felt insignificant and invisible. Initially, I didn't want to join First Press. Everyone seemed to have more money and confidence than I did. No one seemed to be struggling with unemployment or loneliness. It seemed like a congregation of successful Christians who'd made all the right choices. I felt displaced and avoided patio conversations and left as soon as I could. Things changed abruptly once I began volunteering in ministries, first in Stephen's ministry, and then storytelling with children. That's where I found connection and friendship, and I realized my misperceptions. Everyone struggled in different ways. I'm astonished now to look back and see how God took care of us. We had 2 children, Noah and Sophie, but could barely pay rent. Our neighbors were noisy and disruptive. We were able to buy a house in Oakland with the help of friends, especially Ted over here, Ted Streeter. Then almost immediately, I lost my job. I had very little income for 4 years. During that time, Carol's art sales zoomed. She was able to support the family just on her art sales. Unbelievable. But it was a very frustrating time for me. I remember one night being so angry that I got in my car and drove up to the hills and yelled, "God, I just want to make more money than Carol. That's all I ask. Just let me make more money than Carol." I really feel for young adults who have a tough time finding work that pays right now. It's a hard time. When I pull out my journals from that time, though, I see myself trying so hard to find a job, pulled in multiple directions, not sure where to put my energy, not wanting to fail again. And at the same time, I see God working all around me. For example, through our kids' elementary school, we became close friends with a single mom, Brenda, who was suffering from lupus. She was raising 3 children by herself. We invited the kids over and took care of them when their mom was unable to. Carol accompanied her to the hospital when she got sick. And eventually she died. And her 3 kids had to move in with their uncle. But because I was unemployed, I had the time to step in and drive them around and take them to school events. Another way God has drawn me into community is through writers. I've always enjoyed writing and wanted to learn the craft of poetry. So 8 years ago, I started a writing group with just 3 people. Chris Corwin is one of them. We met in my living room and shared our poems twice a month. The group slowly grew to about 10 committed poets. We began meeting over Zoom during the pandemic, and we still gather regularly. We've become really close as group members. There's something about sharing poetry that knits us together. We found that poetry is a way to express the unexpressible, to give voice to emotions that prose can't adequately capture. Another friendship breakthrough occurred when, a year ago, I enrolled in a Master of Fine Arts program in poetry through Pacific University in Oregon. It was a really good decision. For 2 weeks each January and 2 weeks each June, I gather with about 80 other writers for a residency outside Portland for listening and learning. It feels great to be with my people, a diverse group of writers who are learning to be transparent and honest with one another and who take words seriously. Okay, so my final story here. I'm often drawn to be with people who are frustratingly different than myself. Ted Lewis was one of those. He was one of the guys Brian Connery introduced me to back in 1979. Ted was an alternative kind of guy. He distrusted anything conventional. He held mainstream culture at arm's length. He distrusted vaccines and pharmaceuticals. He was uncomfortable in most churches, though he was deeply committed to following Jesus. He distrusted the news media. He read everything by C.S. Lewis, George MacDonald, Jacques Ellul, and others. He became deeply involved in Christian pacifism. He wouldn't vote. He drove me crazy, and I admired him deeply. He was a dedicated... Okay, here's where I always cry. So I'll see if I can get through this. He was a dedicated Christian peacemaking activist. He threw himself into restorative justice, and he helped convicted offenders reconcile with their victims. When the pandemic hit, Ted refused to get vaccinated and visited us without masking. Once, while on a walk in Redwood Park, he criticized the CDC, and I got angry, and I thought the friendship was over. But because of his work in restorative justice, Ted spent the next few months, working out a process for dialogue. He wanted to talk, to work things out, to reconcile, and we did. Not perfectly, but good enough. We still disagreed. I still thought he was a little crazy, but we were able to talk it out and understand our histories and why we believed what we did. Then a little over a year ago, Ted came down with an aggressive brain cancer that took his life in a few short months. His death really floored me. Even the way he chose to die without painkillers made me angry. I'm still mad at him for some of the choices he made, but I'm really glad we were friends. In fact, the more he annoyed me, the closer I felt to him. I was surprised by how hollowed out I felt, and still feel after he died. So, let me be honest. All my friends drive me crazy. I'm sure it works both ways. I know that every one of you would annoy me at some level if I got to know you well. But isn't that one of the marks of a deepening friendship? I need friends who drive me crazy. I need friends to laugh with me, cry with me, annoy me, and disagree with me. Because while loneliness and isolation are options, they're not healthy options. Going back to my original metaphor, no one should be free climbing El Capitan solo. It's scary and dangerous. We all need climbing partners with good harnesses and ropes in this cliff ascent we call faith. And we all need each other. So that's what I have to say.
Well, we have a couple of options at this time. Would you like to maybe handle a few questions? Is there anything you want to read?
Sure.
Read at this time, or?
I didn't really bring anything to read, but
Okay.
I'm glad to answer any questions if anyone. Yes, Michael.
In 1970, you and Carol went to teach in China. It was about 55 years ago.
It was 1986.
And then in your memory, in the memorial service of Master Chen, you wrote in the memory, both you and Carol lost 30 pounds.
Yeah,
You were teaching.
that's
So
right.
Can you comment a little bit on that?
Yeah, that's right.
You lost 30 pounds. How can I imagine you are teaching in China now with 30 pounds off your weight now?
Yeah. We taught in China. It was actually 1986, and we were in an area where there wasn't a whole lot of good food in the winter, so we were living on cabbage and vegetables and rice, and we lost 30 pounds. So when I left China, I weighed 130. Yeah. We were pretty skinny by the time we got back. But it was an amazing adventure. It really was.
You were the second group of teacher taught in China.
Yeah.
After the ERRC Educational Resource Referral China.
Right.
By my wife, Mother Chen.
Yeah. And when we went over, it was called Friends of the Tent Makers.
When you went over there, it's called Friends of the Tent Maker.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
Then they changed another organization because
Yeah.
the religious were named Tent Maker. Does not fit so well as educational because the teachers are educational.
That's right. Yeah, David.
Let me just tell you a little follow-up story about Ted Lewis. I was the president of the International Jacques Ellul Society for 24 years, and in the last 10 years, Ted Lewis became the executive director. That's what enabled me to stay on as president so long as to have this amazing, multi-talented fan of Jacques Ellul. But we had a huge conference in Chicago scheduled for July 2024. And Ted Lewis and I were working, night and day, basically, organizing this thing with people coming from around the world, all coming to Chicago for this big conference. And all of a sudden, my executive director, Ted Lewis, has a brain tumor, glioblastoma. And as Ed said, he died 4 months later. So this thing, if you know anybody who's had that kind of cancer, boy, it just knocks you over and immediately. And so, I worked a little bit with Ted, but I was in trouble, and the conference was in trouble. And it was Ed Aust who stepped forward and carried this thing along with me and another guy, but Ed was sensational. He just immediately said, I can't do anything about Ted's health, but I want to help you by doing what he was doing. So all the detail work, like getting ready for the registrations and the details, that guy stepped up and did it. So, it's a friend that sticks closer than a brother.
Thanks, David. Yeah.
So Ed, when we're working back there in the back tech, and I'm talking your ear off, am I annoying you? Oh, I was hoping so, because then I can say he's my friend because I annoy him.
No, I like it, actually. Keep it up. Hi, Grant.
Are you still friends with people you were friends with before?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I've lost track with Charlie Brown. I'm not sure where he is now.
We had a minister here at Earl called Charlie Brown.
Really?
Yeah. Was it with Earl, I think?
I kind of doubt it was him. All right, well, yes.
So has creative writing and poetry and journaling always been part of your life, or is that a recent thing?
It's always been part of my life. It's something I always had to shelve. I couldn't really, I was always doing it at lunchtimes and I've always been writing. Yeah, Raymond.
And first of all, I just want to thank you for such a beautiful reflection, and just find it so inspiring, just in terms of encouraging me, and I'm sure many of us, to invest in our friendships more. deeply. I just have a question and an observation. It seemed like maybe it's something about men growing older that where we start to really appreciate those friendships more. And I'm just wondering why it'd be nice to see younger faces in this room too. And I wonder whether you have any thoughts about that, or this group. I'm new to the group, so I don't know whether this is something that people talk about.
Yeah, I totally agree.
We all agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's a real crisis of loneliness among young adults, young men especially, young women too, but it's a little bit more for men from the studies I've seen. There was a Gallup poll just this year, 2025, last year. It said that 25% of young adults, like under the age of 40, said that they had been lonely the day before when they were questioned, which was way up from years before. So, yeah, I agree. I'm not sure what the solutions are, what the answers are.
Vern had
Yeah,
some.
I'm curious, when you went to China, was that the first time you were gone overseas and lived?
Yeah, it was.
And so for you, I mean, I'm thinking it's kind of really out of your comfort zone to go do that, right? And then now you're with these people that you've got to interact with. Were you a temple teacher at the time? Is that what that was? Teaching English?
Yeah, we were teaching English at an agricultural university. So most of our students already had some English, but they wanted to learn it from, native speakers.
Well, I think it's just a great way, and I wish more young people would go and experience another culture and another language to just get out of that comfort zone and understand, they're just like us, really. I mean, and to have more, let's say, ability to talk to them, because I think that's great for getting out of your own shell and understand what they're going through.
Yeah. Yeah, Michael.
Just one comment. ERRC Educational Resource Referral China, one of the priorities is to send good teachers that teach on the leading university of China, because we believe China is ruled by top down. So we try to influence the top people. And sure enough, a lot of our teachers actually taught in Beijing and Tsinghua, and all those people came up to be top of the political leadership.
Yeah.
So that is essential, important.
Yeah, and during COVID, Carol and I had some time to try and look up old students. And we couldn't always find them, but we would see their professional papers that they'd published in journals. And so it was obvious that they were pretty high up in academic circles. And one of my good friends there was the head of a department at, I think it was Shanghai University. And so I was able to get in touch with him. So yeah, it was amazing. And by the way, Carol and I have started teaching ESL again, volunteering over in West Oakland, East Oakland, at Primera Iglesia Presbyterian Church. And it's been so amazing to get to know working laborers and housekeepers, men and women who are here from Guatemala, and the stakes are really high for them. They really want to learn English to give them a little more security. But it's so cool to be friends with them, there's not that hierarchy of teacher-student. It's more like friend-friend, and we're learning as much from them as they are from us. And there are opportunities there to volunteer too, if you're interested.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Let's give him, yeah.